siblings and their mates and friends, and he like wrote the news for the hour and say hi and everything. But he had this, he said he was gonna.
Yeah, whenever you are starting to work on a project, on a bigger project, that is potentially a bigger project, you would like to have an opportunity to move things forward with the possibility also to roll back. So let's say that you have done your first iteration on a project, and you feel like that you would like to branch off from your initial plan, and you want to do this crazy experiment, but you want to make sure that all the files and all the working elements of the solution that you just built are stored in a way that you can get back to them easily. And one way of doing that is making a copy of your folder, and renaming it like version 1 or experiment whatsoever. But if it contains a lot of configuration files, and in there are all kinds of interesting paths and things to change, then maybe it's not necessarily the best way to go. But this is how it was happening in the old days, and but then version control systems came to the rescue. So and the early one was called SCM. I remember it from the 90s when I started to do web design and HTML and CSS and things like that. Yeah, see you tomorrow. And I didn't really use it because it seemed quite hard, and it was the same principle basically, that you would make a copy of a folder, you do a change, and then you would upload it somewhere via network. So I really never got into it. But then at some point version control became very hot, and everybody started to talk about Git and how easy it is to version things with Git. As initially I didn't understand that it's this easy or whatever, because actually the entry point is quite steep, but don't worry, I'm gonna try to explain it in the simplest possible form. And it came out of necessity to, so the software itself, it came out of from the necessity to version control the Linux kernel. And as you know, Linux is written by this guy, Linus Torvalds. He was actually a student from Helsinki University, as far as I know. And so this is the JIT website and so on. So the creator of Linux decided that he needs to build another thing that would become as cool in a way, and this thing was directly connected to Linux, because the previous version control system that he was using, I think he was using Mercurial, it was not really compatible with the licensing version, with the licensing policy that they were trying to, that people were trying to pull off with Linux. As far as I know the story, so the first version of JIT was made during a flight from the US to Europe, or vice versa, and yes, he succeeded to create a tool that would make the other things that were quite difficult with other version control systems really easy. Like, for example, you would so the things that I was talking in the beginning, that you would be able to make your little experiment, so your crazy experiment for 1 day or 2 days, and even if it fails, if it fails, you would have the opportunity to quickly go back to where you were before, or if it works out, you would have the opportunity to actually merge it into the existing solution and share with other people who are collaborating with you. And this is why if you start looking for images related to Git, you'll see all these graphs. There's version 1, version 2, version 3, and like delta 1, delta 2. Maybe this is not the best representation, but then here then they are pulling, fetching, cloning. Like it's a lot of lines and kind of terms, it's kind of presented in this friendly, colorful way, but it's really hard to understand that at first if you don't know the terms. So you kind of need. So from my experience, it took some time to understand the concepts around Git. I think this is a really nice representation that this red line is kind of the main line that you are going. And then you're branching off, and you're maybe merging it into the main line again, and then this extra thing is being developed further, and then it also merges back into the main line. There are many ways how to show that, but today I'm gonna just try to show my way, as hoping that it's gonna be simple enough for you to understand. In order to install Git, so on Linux systems it's really easy. You would type, so let's say Debian or Ubuntu, you would type apt or apt-get install Git, just like that. But on Mac OS, so I would suggest you to go with a package manager that is called Brew, which basically installs a package manager which you can then use with your terminal application. I'm going to go to home like so. And then in order to install Git, it's just one command. You would type brew for homebrew, install Git. And the most efficient and at least my preferred way of using Git is through command line, because then it forces you also to learn a little bit more in command line, which is quite a powerful tool. And in the context of the Fab Academy Thursdays, I think it's I'm gonna do another session just that will be focused on command line only. But yeah, I would recommend to do it through command line because it forces to understand the command line a bit more and better, and at the end of it, it's command line and Git in combination. It can become it is a very powerful set of tools, and it can save your projects at random points of time. So yeah, I could, so if I take a look at the website, so it's 2.21, and I could upgrade it to 2.21 just by, I will upgrade it, I will use the opportunity. So yeah, but in order to use version control, we also need something to be version controlled, and in the case of Git, these are going to be basically text files. So everything that is related to code or configuration files or project files. So these files usually contain characters or text, or like human readable text mostly. So even KiCad, so if you remember the lectures where I showed how to make electronics, so all these KiCad files, starting from schematics to netlists to PCB layouts, they are actually text files, and thus they can be really easily version controlled version controlled and version managed by using Git. Today I'm gonna focus on HTML and building a really simple HTML site, even more simple than in the very first HTML lecture that I did that is not recorded. And in order to understand more about HTML, I would recommend you to go to these Mozilla Developer Network web documents, which is really nicely designed, and it's very comprehensive, and they are keeping it up to date, and it explains things really nicely. And there are beginners tutorials, as you see, all kinds of references. And for each, so the reference is the, so once you know the introduction stuff, so the basic stuff about HTML, then you can go to HTML elements and just check each of the elements separately, what they mean, and what is the recommended use of those. Here, P, for example, represents a paragraph of text, and so on. I'm going to try to do it solely through command line in terms of creating the files. But yeah, so in order to edit and create text files, you'll also need a text editor. So I would recommend you one of the freely available ones. So I know the three most popular ones. One is Atom. So it runs on all the operating systems, as far as I know. It's open source, and you can also you can even build your own add-ons for the text editor. Then there's Sublime, which is my preferred tool. I'm very used to it, and maybe just for the reason alone that I'm too used for it, I should use something else. But for today, I'm going to use Sublime. And then there's Brackets, which is a nice editor that is actually I think it's specifically made for web design, and it loves HTML as much as it loves JavaScript. And as far as I have opened it a few times, it actually feels very nice. It's a really nice text editor. So let's use these in combination with HTML to create a simple website. So let's go. What I'm going to do, I'm going to desktop, and I'm going to make a directory, git demo. And I'm going to use cd, or change directory, command in order to move into that directory. So change directory git demo. And pwd is going to show me where am I, and who am I is going to show me who am I. And then at this point I can create the main and most important file in web design and websites in the internet, or the visible internet, which is called index.html. So this is the entry point. I'm going to list the directory in order to see it. So this is the entry point into any website. So the first file that you would, if you open a website, then the first file that your browser is going to ask for is going to be this file. So there are other languages. So there are dynamic HTML languages like PHP or ASP or GSP, all these kind of things. But at the end of the day, they are generating HTML, and if your website is a static HTML website like ours is going to be, then it's most probably going to be a file that has the name index.html. And I have configured my Sublime text editor, so I can call it from command line. But yeah, no worries. So you could actually open it just like that, and you could go to File, Open, and then to Desktop, and so I didn't want you to see all this mess. No, not this. Git demo, yeah, this one, and I can open individual files as I can also open directories. So if I open a directory, then Sublime is going to think that it's more like a project, and it's going to give me the directory with all the files underneath here, this folder that you see on the left side. And in order to create a website, we need to start typing the HTML into it. But first I need to double click on the index HTML, and then Sublime is also going to detect that I am using HTML as my language, and it's also going to give me rules regarding spacing. And in HTML, so that's a very big issue actually. This is very important in a way. So how HTML is being indented, so whether you're using spaces or tabs. So sometimes the file can get really unreadable if you use tabs that are too wide. So I usually prefer to set the tab width to 2 and actually indent using spaces. So it gives a much more reliable representation of the indentation of the resulting file later, but you'll understand what I'm talking about just in a minute. So I start typing HTML, and Sublime gives me hints already, so I can just hit this HTML hint, and it's going to create a skeleton for my HTML website. And this first line here is defining the doc type, and in the early days of, so in the 90s and early 2000s, these document types of HTML, they could, so these refer to different standards or different interpretations of HTML. And these doc types, they would become very long and really hard to read and understand, and then every browser would interpret them differently. And then at some point, the World Wide Web Consortium, so the standard organization, they decided that, okay, let's just go for one standard, so for one doc type, which is going to be HTML5, or just HTML now. So this is like the new semantic HTML representation. So for the new HTML5, you would just need to write this one simple doc type, and that's it. And all of and there would be less problems for the browsers to kind of detect which version is which, and thus it would be less problematic to translate the HTML and related things correctly. So this is important. So just use this simple representation of the doc type. Then HTML, it states where the HTML document starts. So in HTML, it's all based on these tags. Then head, and for the title, let's name it my simple Git website. And another important thing that you should add to the website is also a meta tag. Was it title, or was it So you need to add this meta tag that defines the char set. I always forget the correct. Yeah, it's actually very simple. So which defines the char set of the page. I don't remember, was it dash or not dash? So the simple things that usually are very I'm copying and pasting and not always remembering from memory. Yeah, you actually need a dash in between, so it's UTF 8, like so. And this is going to make sure that your language is going to be displayed as it should in your website. So let's say if we create a header in your native language, so in my native language it would be mana vienkārša git mājaslapa. So you see there are all kinds of weird characters inside. So this A with a line above, and then this sh and another, yeah, and we have more of those. So this charset meta tag is going to make sure that these are going to be displayed correctly. And then we are going to add a paragraph of text, which is going to be comparably smaller text than the header, than the heading, and we are going to add this website is going to show you what is Git about, like so. And now if I go back to my command line and I open index.html, then it's gonna open in this Firefox browser in my case, and here we go. You have a simple website, so which has a heading and some text over here. So in the HTML lecture I would go even deeper, and I would show you how to build a menu and how to insert pictures and all that. So we are going to do part of that now as we go forward with Git, but let's stay with this one. So this is our initial version of website. So we spent like very hard 15 minutes in order to build this, and now we feel like we are done. We needed a cup of coffee or a break, and we are actually ready to start version controlling it. And yeah, in order to start version control it, we need to make sure that with our terminals we are into the correct directory and Git is installed. So to check whether the Git is installed, we need to type git ---- version. It's gonna spit out the version of Git, so which apparently it now seems that it's the latest. It's 2.21, so which is very good. So if you want to know more about the command line version of Git, we can type git --help, and it's going to give us all the commands that you can actually use with Git. So as you see, starting from cloning, init, add, move, reset, all of these. So let's just go over them one by one. Not all of them, but the basic ones. In order to start the repository, you need to type git init. And Git is going to report you that it initialized an empty Git repository and give you this path, so which is your location plus this .git extension, and you wonder what it is. So if you type just simple ls, like listing the directory without any extra options, you're going to just see the index.html files, so the visible files. But then in that same directory there are also hidden files and directories, and in this case Git generates a hidden directory, and you can see that by typing ls-a. It's going all the hidden files and directories in the location where you are currently. You'll see that there's .git. On top of that, there's also this single dot, double dot. So the single dot means the current directory. It's like a pointer to the current directory, and this double dot means that it's a pointer to directory there's one level up. And if you use cd to go into the Git directory and type ls to list the files here, you will see that there's something going on. So there's some sort of a head file, there's config file, like hooks, objects, refs. So this is all the things that are related to Git. We can take a look at the config, for example. and there's not much in. So you can use this file to configure your repository, but usually you don't have to. I'm gonna move one directory upwards by using this double dot syntax. And sometimes when you're just starting out with Git, it's important to actually modify the global variables, so the configuration. And to do that, you should type git config -- because you want your computer is your computer, and you want all the Git commits or all the version entries to be signed with your name and your email. So you're too lazy to set those up for every other project. And then user.name, and here you enter your name, and then the other most important thing is email, so user email. So I usually set it to my Gmail address, always. So like this, and I think when you type git config just like that, then it's going to give you options what you can do with it. Git config global. Yeah, so it doesn't give me too much information. So, but these two things you should do beforehand. So you should configure your name and you should configure your email address for Git in order to start working with it. So this is quite important. So after Git init, so we can start asking Git whether it sees any changes in the project directory where we are working currently, and in order to see whether it sees any changes, we type Git Status. This is an important command to remember. And with command line tools, it is very important to carefully read the output. So I'm not always doing that carefully enough myself, but it is essential. So this is going to give you a lot of information about what's going on there actually. So and you see that after I type Git Status, Git is reporting back to me that on branch master, no commits yet. So I haven't made any commits. And there are untracked files. And it also instructs me that I can use git add file to include in what will be committed. Yeah, and here we have some new terms. So you see that the first of the terms is branch. So what is branch? So if you're thinking about branches, you think of trees maybe, or the roots of the tree, and they are branching. So there's the main, like the base of the tree, and then there's 1, 2, 3 branches, and then the branches are branching off more into branches. And it's the same with Git. It's actually kind of a tree. So you're working on the branch master, which is the master branch of the tree. And then there's a possibility also to branch off and work on an additional version and kind of add some features or things like that. And so most of the time for simple projects, also for the project of today, we are just going to use the branch master, which is only the main line. And we are going to add snapshots or commits. So at every point where you want to branch off from your project, so that point of time, that point into the version history is actually called a commit. And what that means that you are describing what you are doing at that point, and you are also adding specific files. So you can add one or more files to that commit, and you can describe what did you just change. And this is where this git add file comes into play. So if you type git add index.html. This means that we just added the file index.html into the so-called staging area. So we haven't made a commit yet, but we put it kind of on a shelf. So imagine as going into the storage room, taking a sheet of acrylic, putting on a shelf or a desk there, then going to the compartment where there are plywood sheets. You're taking a few sheets of plywood. You are going back and putting on the shelf where the acrylic sheet is. Then you're maybe looking for glue and your project box. So you take all that, you put it in one big pile before you are actually bringing it back into the lab. So you can think of it, of the staging area as this shelf where you are temporarily putting these things, where you're temporarily putting this acrylic sheet, plywood, and whatnot. And then when you are bringing it out from the lab, you know the reason why, you know your project, so you can describe why do you need these things, and this is where you're actually committing. And we use a flag here, -m, which is going to give us an opportunity to specify a message. So you are bringing this into the lab, and then there's Lowry in front of you, and he's asking, so why do you need this stuff? And you think a little bit, and because you think initially that you don't know, but you do. So you actually want to make a website. So this is your initial stock of material. So you say to Lowry, so this is my initial stock or state. Fair enough. So Lowry he says that he yes agreed and understood, and so you hit enter, and then you see again there is this message. So the master root commit. And every commit has this random identifier, kind of a so-called hash. And it also reports you, so it shows you the message, and it shows also how many files were changed. So while one file, which is the index.html, and 12 insertions. So what does it mean? So 12 insertions. So Git is based on, it's tracking changes based on lines in file. So whenever something changes, even one character somewhere, Git is going to recognize that the whole line is being changed. Not this one character in a specific XY position in the file, but one whole line. And so 12 insertions means that 12 lines in the file were inserted. And if we look at the file here, I have these line numberings here. We see that, yeah, exactly, there are 12 lines, actually. Yeah, that's true. And it also saves the mode. So I'm not going to talk in detail about those. So it just saves the permissions of the file as well. So if it's restored on another system, then it's actually maintaining the permission model as well. And what now? So now we can move on to utility functions like log, like git log. And what it does, it shows us the commit history. And since we have only one, it's showing only one. So first of all, it's showing us the commit identifier. So this, I think it's like 32 bytes hash, if I'm not wrong. Then it shows us also the author, the name of the author, and the email address, which is really cool, and the date. Yeah, so it's timestamped, and then also the message of the comments. So what we actually changed. So, and this is opened in a little command line program that is called less, which is nice for reading bigger text files in the command line environment. And in order to exit this state, we need to hit Q, and we are going back to the command line. And then, yeah, okay, so this is this limited description of the commit, but what if we want to see what really got changed in, like, what were the real additions in this commit? Then we can use git show. And if we are using git show without any arguments at the end, it's going to show us what changed in the last commit. So, and it's again going to open up less text reading application on the command line. And it's going to start with the same information that we saw in the log part. But it's also going to give us the so-called diff, or difference from the previous commit. And what we see here is some basic information. So this is like statistics in a rather coded language. But what is important here, what you can see is what exactly got added. So and here in my case, the added lines are highlighted green. And if you don't have any color mapping for these kind of things, then it's going to be black and white, or white and black, or white and blue, depending on your terminal application and your personal preferences. But in front of those, there's always going to be plus. And for the lines that you remove, you will see a minus. And to exit this state, you need to hit Q again. And let me demonstrate something with minus. So let's say that I'm really picky about the way my HTML file looks, like the source code looks. So I don't care so much how does it look in the browser, but I care how it looks here. So if I have two lines, so this empty line, it doesn't really look decent. So I'm going to remove it like so. And I'm going to hit Command S to save it. And I'm going back to the terminal and going to type git status. And Git reports me that there is that on branch master, there are changes that are not staged for commit. So this staged relates to the staging area that I was talking about earlier. So this place where you put your material from the storage. So this little temporary shelf. And again, so if something has changed, then we would like to see what it is. So sometimes we do bigger changes, or we did a change yesterday and we forgot to add a commit because we thought we are going to continue the change in the other day in the morning. We can use git diff to see what it exactly is. And we see that there's this little minus sign. And Git is going to show us the context, so 3 lines before and 3 lines after. So we see where exactly the change happened. And this little minus is, so since we removed an empty line, it's just showing us that it removed an empty line. And again, it's opening it up in the less text reading application, and we can hit Q to exit it. And yeah, let's just do it. Let's add it to the staging area by using git add. Index HTML, and I'll type git status again just to show you that Git is going to show you that actually there's something in the staging area, that there are changes to be committed. And maybe at this point you realize that, hey, I actually want to continue my change and I want to unstage my changes. Then you can do git reset. And we are going to go back to the previous state where the staging area is free. So we can free up staging area by using git reset. But let's add it back again. And let's use git commit -m to add a commit. And this time we want to seriously tell that, so we clean up the file. Great. And now if we type git log, we see that there's a history with 2 entries already. And yeah, now let's do some more changes. So let's continue it for a few times more. So let's see. I think that I will translate this to English. So my website. And I'm gonna add another change. So git add index HTML, git commit -m, add text in the, or no, add title in the right language, git log, 3 entries, very nice. And let's maybe add a image. So let's try to find a funky image somewhere on the internet. Let's go with again. But then I have some nice cat pictures. So wait a minute, my own cat pictures. Yes, I think I'm gonna use that. Yeah, one of these is gonna be good. This or maybe that. Which one? It's very hard to decide. I think this is more like it shows character much more. So I will crop it. So I will go with tool. Yeah, I need to select the cropping area like this. So it's going to be a little portrait of a little master. And then tools, crop. And for the internet, for websites, it's usually very important to adjust also the size of those. So it's important to keep them 72 dpi, so pixels per inch. And I'm going to resize this to 1200 by something random. Hit OK. And yeah, it's a really weird image editor, to be honest. I don't understand Apple really why they made it in this way. Yeah, I'll hit duplicate, and now it's a copy. And now I'm going to move it to the desktop or Git demo and cat JPG quality. Okay, so let's save. I'm just going to save those, hoping that nothing got lost really. And then I need to add it into HTML, and for that we have the magical image tag, which has an attribute which is called source. And the syntax is that you specify the value for this attribute by using equal sign and double quotes. And as you see in Sublime, when you add a file into the directory, you can see it also here. Actually, you can click on it and what's that? But there he is, master himself. Source cat, and then HTML. It's since the early ages, there's another attribute which is called alt, which is the alternative text. So for example, it might happen that your browser is blocking images, or it is failing to load them because of maybe there are some image blockers in between you and the actual server. And then it's nice when you have an alternative description. You can add a description of what that image is. And if you look in the, oops, what just happened? In the browser, if you refresh the browser page, then you will see that there's the cat image. It has, yeah, so it's quite big. Okay, but at this point we can add So we have, so here when we type git status, we see that git tells us that there is one modified file, and then there are files that are not tracked. And the files that are not tracked, so Git is not keeping version history of these files. But we can add those by using the same method with git add. And the good thing is that you can chain multiple files together like this, one after another, and you can add them with one line. And now in the staging area, in this little shelf where we are putting, temporarily putting our material before bringing it out from the storage room, we have a cat image, and it's also labeled as new file. And we have a modified file, index.html. And at this point, we can make a commit. And we are going to tell that we just added a cat image, like so. Git log. Here we go. So there's the whole history. And unless you can use the up and down arrow buttons to kind of nicely navigate through the file and see all the lines. If you have page up and page down on your keyboard, then you can skip entire pages. Q to exit it again. And now, so yeah, let's introduce some CSS, because like this is not acceptable, so it's not fully responsive. We actually want this image to be responsive and scale to the width of the browser. So how about we use some CSS to do so? And in HTML, the easiest way to do so is to use the style tags. It's adding also like this type, which is not necessarily needed. It's going to be CSS and I think like 99.9% of the cases. And here we can, so this is yet another different language. So if you want to learn more about CSS, then you should also go to Mozilla Developer Network and you can have all the introductory and reference files that are there. So you see there are tutorials and reference for the CSS. And what do you need? We need to find out so how we could control the width, but yeah, I don't have to do that. I actually know that. So in style, so you need to use a selector. So yeah, in CSS there are selectors which are selecting certain elements in your HTML file, and the simplest way to select an element is using their tag name. And in our case, we want to work with the image, and it's just like that. You type image, and this is our definition. And then there's the opening and closing bracket, and we can specify some style related things to it. And in this case, we want to change the width, and you want to change the width to 100% of the kind of parent, like enclosing element, which is the body element. And we want the height to be automatic or proportional. So this is how you do it in CSS. And let's see, so we go back to our website and hit refresh, and yes, now it's responsive. So now we have a fully responsive website with a cat, and the cat image scales with our browser. And yeah, let's assume that we randomly make a mistake somewhere here and add a random character in front of the cat image here. And we refresh the page and we see that the alternative text is appearing here. So this is what happens when the browser cannot find the image. So I'm going to remove that for now. And now since we just changed the style, we can actually type git status in order to see whether Git sees the changes, and type git diff in case we forgot what the changes were, and Git shows us that we just added this style statement over here. So you see, once you add more lines, then these 3 lines on top on the bottom showing the context they're actually very useful. They show you clearly where, like in a relatively human way, where the change appeared and what was actually added. I'm hitting Q to exit this. Git adds index to add it to the staging area. Git commit -m to add a commit message and commit. So also here, so the message, it should be enclosed in double quotes or single quotes. It might be that in the text that you're writing for the message, you're using single quotes. Then it's a nice idea to use double quotes. But for the messages, it should actually be really plain and simple. It should be not more than 1 sentence. And so the recommended way working with Git is that you make smaller changes and you describe them in really short and simple terms, rather than you work for a day and then commit at the end of the day, like things that you don't even remember anymore. So you describe it superficially, and you don't include things that you didn't do, that you don't remember, that are there but you don't remember at the end of the day. So it's better work with this philosophy in mind, that you do small incremental steps. So you make the image responsive, then you just say so. So you just made cat image responsive, like so. Git log, yeah, it's there. So yeah, how about we add some JavaScript? So a little bit of interactivity. I mean, I usually use a JavaScript library that's called jQuery. That's kind of the easiest way to start. So in the times when there were browser wars and every browser would interpret your HTML differently, also the JavaScript was under the same axe, and you would write JavaScript for one browser and it wouldn't necessarily work the same way in other browsers. And this is when jQuery came in, and it promised to provide the same interface for all the different browsers that were around the internet. So yeah, and it works still, and it's not just providing the same interface for all the browsers, but it makes several things easier to be done. And there's a huge community around jQuery, and you can get all kinds of interesting plugins in order to do all kinds of interesting things with your websites. But yeah, I mean, I'm fond of kind of this dependency-less development, and I mean, like, basically, I just think that jQuery is going to get you out from most of the situations. You just need jQuery, and then, you know, as less plugins as possible. And ideally, build your website only with HTML and CSS. But let's just, for the sake of example, I'm just going to add this. Here, we need the compressed production jQuery. So it's going to be a minified file that is going to be easy for all the browsers that are going to access your website to load. And it looks like this. Quite a lot of code, but then you would select all, you would copy. You would go to your Sublime or your project, and you would go to File, New File, and you would paste it in here. And then you would save it as jQuery.min.js and close it. And in HTML, in order to load a JavaScript library file or a JavaScript, you would use the script tag. And you would provide the source. So it has a really weird syntax. So you could write the JavaScript in between those, but if your JavaScript is in a file, like our jQuery library, I think I got the name wrong. It's actually like that, jQuery. Then you need to specify a source attribute, in a similar way as you specify the image source. But I always find it's really weird how they were building this tag system here. Like you see, like image tag, it doesn't have a closing tag, so it's just a tag with a source and alt text and all this. But then for the script, so it's primarily a tag where you would be able to type in all kinds of JavaScript snippets in here, in between the opening and closing tag. But when you're using it with the source attribute, you still need to keep the closing tag. So which is it's very weird for me to understand. Actually, it could be nice to have a script tag version which doesn't have the closing tag. And in the source, you would enter a jQuery.min.js. Just out of curiosity, I wonder if I will test the jQuery library around here, the same script tag, where it's going to work. And in jQuery, so the library alone is, so that it provides you with an object, with a global object, like the jQuery object, which is this $. And then it gives you, you have to specify which of the elements on the website you are targeting. I'm going to target the document element. And when the document element becomes ready, namely when it's loaded, then I'm going to execute an anonymous function. So you kind of pass into the ready function an anonymous function as parameter. And here you can throw an alert. Now we go back to the browser and we refresh, and it actually doesn't work. So what we need to do in order this to work, we need to cut out this part, and we need to use another script element over here, and we need to enter the script here. And yeah, now it's working. You see that once you open your website, there's a warning that someone is actually watching your website. You just hit OK and continue watching the website. You can do other things. So for example, when document is loading, once it's done, you could actually change the you could change the title. So I could do a bit more funky stuff. I could define a function which would be run after a timeout. So let's say function change title. And here I'm going to use the same jQuery thing, and I want to select an element over here. And I'm going to select h1 and change the, was it like inner HTML? Let's change it to something like that. So I'm gonna try to change the content of the h1 element to loaded at last. And in the document ready function, I'm going to use a JavaScript function set timeout, where I'm going to pass in the name of the function and time in milliseconds when it should be called. It doesn't work. I need to check the jQuery reference. Okay, I think I can just use, instead of this HTML, use text. Yes, and it works. It changes the text. And furthermore, so I could add more functions, like function change paragraph. And in this case, the function is going to change everything that is in the P part. And when the document is going to become ready, I'm going to activate to set a timeout for the change paragraph function, and I'm going to add 2 seconds more to the previous time, like this. This is one way how you can do it. So nice. So you have animated website right now. And another thing how to do it is that you could not set 2 timeouts after another, like this, which is actually quite a lot more readable. So this is you could just build kind of a timeline out of set timeout functions. But you could also cut this set timeout out, and you could add it into the change title function like this. And you would change the timeout from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. And then once the first timeout would be triggered and title would be changed, then another timeout would be activated, and 2 seconds after that, the change paragraph function would be triggered. Like so. But it's about Git, so let's see what Git Status says. And it says us that we added that there's an untracked file, like the jQuery library file, and that we actually modified index. Let's use git-diff to see what we actually changed. So you see, it shows us that we added this chunk of text. So this is JavaScript over here, and there are some other things. So yeah, that we removed HTML tag and then we added it back again, so weird things going on. Q. So let's add these files to the staging area. And commit them. git log to see what's going on. Yeah. Okay, so we have all three most important components of modern website. So we are using HTML5, we are using some CSS style, and we are actually loading JavaScript library, and we are writing some custom JavaScript on top of that. Very nice. And now let's assume that our website project grows, and we would like to collaborate with someone else in order to increase the speed of the process. And we need some, we kind of, in order to share, we cannot really use the same computer. It wouldn't make sense that we would, share the computer and everybody of us would configure it, configure the JIT for their needs with their email addresses and names. No, we are not going to do that. So everybody of us is going to have their own computer with JIT configured on it. And in order that to work together, we will need a JIT repository. We need to put that JIT repository somewhere online, somewhere in a place where it is accessible by us all. And this is why I opened these pages here. So one page or server which allows you to host your JIT repositories is GitHub. Then there's Bitbucket. And then there's GitLab. So all of these are offering you their servers for free in order for you to host code. And I remember when GitHub appeared, then it was it would let you use their services for free if the project that you are working on is open source. So if your repository is public and everybody can see it, then they are giving you this account for free, and you can create infinite amount of repositories, and they are not charging you anything. And then, then I think there was a competition introduced, so Bitbucket and GitLab that appeared, and so they started competing, and then GitHub started to offer also private repositories. I think they still offer private repositories only if you are paying them. But then there's GitLab. Actually, I like this the most from all of it. It's really purely amazing tool. Yeah, DevOps. It's also kind of a new trending name. Yeah, this is like a a new IT field where you would set up clusters of computers, and you would version control configuration files, and you would prepare workstations for 100 people at the same time, and you would provide software development teams with really efficient workflows, how they could do just one Git commit, and in a few hours their software is automatically recompiled and becoming available through the company website. And I have tried some of those features, and these are really great. So, for example, you can make your Git repository, and every time you update the Git repository and GitLab notices that, you can actually tell GitLab to take that code. So let's say it's C code, or it's Python, or it's C++, Go, whatever, and you want to compile it in an application by using your custom tool set. So you could have your separate server, which is configured in a way that it can compile your specific project with your specific rules. And you could install an utility that is called GitLab Runner on your custom server. And every time you are updating GitLab is going to call this other server to the GitLab Runner. He's going to communicate with that. And GitLab Runner is going to pull down your code. It's going to make a really safe environment if you're using Docker, and it's going to compile your project, and it's going to notify back to the repository whether the project is actually compiling, whether it has errors or not. So this nowadays also involves things like tests, like continuous testing. This is called continuous integration. So that on top of the fact that you would be compiling it, you would have a test, like automated tests defined, and your server would run them as well. And if they would pass, then a success message would be sent back to GitLab that it actually worked, and if not, not. And then on a success message, you can also define what to do. So maybe you want to take the resulting file and you want to put it on a website, on another server, or you want to delete it, or you want to send it by email to someone. So it's very, very powerful. And just for the example, so I'll show you how to make Git repository online. Here we go. Yeah, and all you have to do is you have to click on this green New Project button. And I'll enter a name, it's just going to be Git demo. And yeah, GitLab is automatically going to give me this name that is HTTP compatible. And I can also add a description. So this project shows how to make a simple HTML website with Git. It's not that we use Git to build it really, but whatever. And we are going to make it public. Create a project. And now I really like this, that it always gives you these instructions, what you have to do. So it also reminds you about the fact that you should update your config if you want your commits to work. And you can start with an empty repository and you can clone it to your computer and start working from there. Or like in our case, we actually have a existing Git repository. And like an existing folder with Git repository. And what do we need to do? We need to add path to the project. So to the by using this git remote command. And we copy this line and we go back to our project. And we add git remote add origin. And now if we, so yeah, to explain, so git remote is a module of Git, taking care of the remote locations of Git repositories. And add is to add a remote repository. Origin is the alias of the location. So it's going to be the original location, so the main location that everybody else could access and modify. And then we need to specify the address, which is so this Git demo, Git residing on GitLab server. So I myself, I'm using the SSH version of it. But it could be also HTTPS. So if you don't have a two-factor authentication enabled in your account, then you could you will be able to just enter username and password and push the code to the repository. If you type git remote -v, then you will see the addresses. And we need to push the existing commits, and for that we use this git push -u origin master. And now, yeah, so it created a new branch master on the remote server and GitLab in this case. I'm going to hit refresh, and you see all the files that we created are there. So now they're on the server. And it was easier than opening file management software that which would let you to connect to a server and upload some files and all that. It was just, you know, a few lines. You would add the address and then you would, you know, just command it to push the code to the server, and it was done. And another thing about these repositories is if you take a look around and you check other open source repositories, they usually have an entry point, like a description file, which is usually called Readme. And it usually has this MD extension, and this is another new thing that could be interesting for you to learn. It's Markdown. It's just a simplified way of making your text file structured, which is also relatively computer readable, and for computers it's easy to transcode them into HTML or other markup languages. So we are going to create a README file here. And then in our text editor, we are going to open up the README file. And single hash means that this is going to be heading 1, the title of the document. Git demo it is. So each of if you leave a space, so a blank line in between in between sentences or blocks of text, they are going to be interpreted as separate paragraphs in HTML. And you can make lists like so. And you can make these lists elements to be links by using this syntax. So in the square brackets, you will have the actual name that is going to appear in the link, and then in the normal brackets, you'll have the link. And I'm going to HTML over here, CSS over there, and JavaScript at the end of it, like so. And these are all going to link to Mozilla Developer Network reference pages, like so. And now in the command line, I'm just going to add the README to our staging area and commit it. And now I type git log, and you see all the history that we just did today. And at this point, I can execute git push, and it's going to push the latest changes to the server. And if we now go to our GitLab repository, which was, no, not here, here, yes, and hit refresh, with the files, you will see that there's this section underneath the file browser, which has the text, the same text that we had in the Markdown file, in the README file, but nicely formatted. So you see that there's a title with bigger letters. So there's one paragraph of text, second paragraph of text, and the list. And when we click on the elements of the list, they are actually bringing to the corresponding links. Like so. And yeah, and that is about it for today. So, I mean, yeah, so this was another block of Fab Academy Thursdays. So next week I will probably prepare another block. So Fab Academy is ending and the topics are running out. So now this is mostly working on final projects, and then at the end of it, it's going to be final presentations. So during the following months and weeks, I am going to catch up with the things that I failed to record, in the beginning. So it's again going to be some HTML basics. I think I want to do another session about command line basics, so bash and command line and shells and things like that. Then I failed also do some things related to the to motors, or to how to drive motor drivers, and a few other things. So during the summer, it's going to be fun with Fab Academy Thursdays.